I were to ask you, which is more important, hard work or business smarts, we'd probably get some division in the room as to what really matters. But if I were to say to you, how many of you want the rewards of sales? How many of you want those Tiffany platters, those trips to anywhere in the world, those big 6-digit incomes? I think we'd be unanimous. We all want that. We all want to be successful in the job. And to be successful, we know we've got to work hard, but we also need to work smart. So if I were to say, if you want the rewards of sales, raise your hand. Can we get a show of hands? That's everybody. And if you want to work yourself into a frazzle to get them, raise your hand. Only one of you wants that. So if you want to work smart and actually have a life, raise your hand. That's our topic. We're going to figure out how to sell smart so we can have a life, but get those rewards. Now, Ann promised you'd get 2 or 3 ideas you can use tomorrow, and that's my goal. I want this to be as practical as possible. But I will warn you that part of what I really love is looking at why things work. You know, if I'm recommending a technique, I want you to know that it's actually going to work, and there's a reason it's going to work. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the psychological research or the factors in terms of decision making that make something that I recommend effective. So you'll get some of the insight as well. All right, let's start off by a little quiz. You don't have to raise your hand, just shout out the answer when you know it. These are 3 easy ones. Number 1, who invented the telephone? Very good, Alexander Graham Bell. I heard a gradual murmur that arose to a crescendo. Alexander Graham Bell, there he is. Kind of looks like me, actually. Anyway, Bell invented the telephone. But did you know that for the first 10 years the Bell Company was in business, they couldn't sell the thing to anybody? Nobody wanted it. For 10 years, he and his partners, his directors of the Bell Telephone Company, struggled to pay the bills, struggled to get anybody to adapt the telephone. They got so desperate that after the first 10 years in business, they were nearly bankrupt. Bell wrote a letter to the president of Western Union, offering to sell them all the patents, all the technology, all the resources of the Bell Telephone Company for $100,000. It's all yours, baby. And the president of Western Union wrote back and said, what possible use could I have for an electrical toy? They couldn't sell it. Without sales, nothing happens. Who invented professional sales? Sales where you are representing a company and you're going out to another company, or in your case to a school or a school board or a school district, and making a sale organization to organization. Who invented that? This guy did it. John Henry Patterson. Now, we've heard of Edison, we've heard of Bell. How many of you have heard of Patterson?
Is it airplane?
No, didn't invent airplanes. John Henry Patterson owned a coal mine in southeast Ohio. He lived in Dayton, Ohio, and he owned coal mines, and he became incredibly wealthy. This is back in the 1870s. And by the time he was in his 40s, he was bored. He had more money than he knew what to do with, and he was bored out of his mind. So he and his brother Frank, who was his co-owner of the coal mine, decided to sell it all and do something new. And they looked around, and there was a little company in Dayton that they were intrigued by. It had a product they had used in their coal mining shop, where, you know, workers came to buy and sell products and food and what have you, and it had saved them a ton of money. It was a cash register. So he decided to buy what was then called National Manufacturing, which he renamed National Cash Register, NCR. He thought, you know, any storekeeper is going to want one of these things because the clerks are taking money out of the drawer. The clerks aren't good at math. They're making incorrect change and giving the customer too much back. They're losing track of IOUs from customers coming in and saying, I'll pay you later. They're losing money. So he bought the company. He's all pumped up. We're going to go out. We're going to sell this all over America. We're going to become rich. We're going to become famous. Guess what happened? Couldn't give the things away. He projected the first year he was going to sell 300 cash registers. He sold 12. Second year, he was hoping to maybe sell 200. They barely sold 20. He was going bankrupt. Now, Patterson, besides being wealthy, and that was gradually diminishing, had a huge ego. And he couldn't stand to be humiliated. And everybody in Dayton was laughing at him. So Patterson did something that was a sign, I think, of his utter desperation. He hired his brother-in-law. Those of you that have brothers-in-law, you know Patterson was willing to do anything at this point. His brother-in-law was a guy named Joseph Crane. Crane had run his own store. He was fairly successful. He was ready for a new job, and he agreed to work for John Henry. He went out, and in the first month, Joseph Crane sold 18 cash registers. That got John's attention. Next month, Joseph sold 24 cash registers. John summoned him to Dayton. What are you doing, he says. How are you selling cash registers? He said, oh, shucks, I don't know. I just go in and talk to them, and they buy the cash register. He said, you're doing something different because nobody else is selling them like this. What are you doing? And Crane was kind of embarrassed. He said, well, I found that there's a certain presentation, and if I give it the same way every time, people buy a cash register. He says, well, give it to me. So Joseph Crane stood there and gave John Henry Patterson the presentation. And Patterson said, you know what? I'd buy one of them. That's a great presentation. So John Henry Patterson, and this is why he gets the credit for inventing sales, made every salesperson at NCR learn Crane's presentation. And that became the basis. The basic value proposition is this. The value of what I'm proposing to you, the impact it's going to have on your organization, minus what it costs, is greater than the value you get from any other solution minus the cost of that solution. Two good things to notice here. One, if you can convince your customer of this, you're going to win. Because only an idiot would buy a solution that delivers less value. Number two, you don't have to have the lowest cost. You just need the biggest delta between value delivered and cost. Now, to establish this, 4 quick principles. Value needs to be based on what the customer wants, not on what you think they should want. If you think that data integrity is really important, but all they're looking for is cost savings, I don't care how you argue for data integrity, it's not going to convince them. So find out how they measure success and try to show the value in those terms. Number 2, quantify it. Try to get the data to quantify in dollars and cents or in seconds saved or in throughput or in some quantifiable measure. It'll be more convincing. Ideally, present it graphically, a bar chart, a trend curve, something to show visually improvement. And finally, try to base it on your differentiators. The fact that you have the unique open software system, the fact that you provide an integrated view of data across multiple channels, these things could help be sources of the value that you're promising to deliver. Smart decision makers are looking for impact. They want to see that when they sign that check for $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, what the company gets back is greater than what they're spending. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at a sales conference. It was a company that had about 800 sales reps, and they'd all been to breakfast that morning. And so while they were off listening to the president of the company give the state of the company, update, I sat in that empty ballroom with literally hundreds of tables and empty coffee cups and dirty forks and plates and just reviewed my notes and got myself together. And as I was sitting there, a fellow came bustling in the room. He looked all around. He saw me off in the corner. He made a beeline right for me. He sat down next to me. He said, "Good morning." I said, "Well, good morning to you." He says, "You're late for the meeting." I said, "Well, no, sir, I'm the next speaker, so I'm not. I'm actually early." He goes, "Oh, good for you." I said, "Why aren't you in there?" He said, "I'm waiting for a limo. They're going to come and take me. I got to go close the deal." I said, "Whoa, congratulations. Must be a big deal." He said, "It's a very big deal, but it's not what you think." He said, "It's a $4 million deal, but I'm not a salesperson. I'm not selling. I'm the VP of purchasing. I got to go sign paperwork to buy something." I said, "Oh, well, let me see if I've got a card in case there's a few crumbs left on that table." We chatted for a while. Charming guy, interesting guy. And at some point he said to me, "So what's your talk about?" I said, "I'm going to be talking about sales proposals and how they can," all of a sudden, he grabbed a dirty fork off the table and he held it right in my face. I'd never had this reaction before. It was a new one. Right in my face, he says, "Let me tell you something. You tell our salespeople, if they write the kind of proposals that I get, I'll make sure they're fired. You got it?" I said, "Yes, I've got it. Can we put the fork down?" I said, "What are you getting? What's the problem?" He said, "I get proposals for $1 million, $2 million, $10 million. You know what I get? I get a bill of materials and a price quote. That's it. No total cost of ownership, no payback analysis, no calculation of value, nothing I can use to make a smart decision." This is exactly how your customer is thinking, and it's exactly what they want you to show them. They may not agree with your numbers. That's okay, but at least show them the thinking that there's value here.